morning. It's Sunday, October 17. We are continuing to explore what it means for us to inhabit what I'm calling a space between. The space between promise and fulfillment. So often in the Bible we see how God makes great promises, and yet it can take some time before those promises become reality. And quite often people have to endure not only times of waiting, but some measure of suffering as they wait for God's promises to become real in their lives. And so this morning I'd like to look at a case study in the Bible of somebody who experienced exactly this. Times of prosperity and great blessing, but also times of suffering, of waiting, of doubting and wondering. We're going to be looking at the story of Joseph, truly a man who could be called a man for all seasons, somebody who enjoyed incredible success, but also times of profound disappointment and loss. The Bible in the book of Genesis spends considerable time on the story of Joseph. There are a lot of chapters dedicated to his story as a young man and all of the things that he experienced in Egypt, how he was reunited with his family. We're going to just take a quick summary of his life as it's recorded in Genesis 39 and 41, just a selection of verses there that really emphasize how the Lord was with Joseph in every situation that he found himself in, whether that situation was one of prominence and success or one of loneliness and struggle. So hear these words recorded in Genesis 39 and 41. I'll say a few words that bridge the gap between this selection of verses. Now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt. Potiphar, an Egyptian who was one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him there. The Lord was with Joseph, so that he prospered, and he lived in the house of his Egyptian master. When his master saw that the Lord was with him and that the Lord gave him success in everything he did, Joseph found favor in his eyes and became his attendant. Potiphar put him in charge of his household, and he entrusted to his care everything he owned. From the time he put him in charge of his household and of all that he owned, the Lord blessed the household of the Egyptian because of Joseph. The blessing of the Lord was on everything Potiphar had, both in his house and in the field. And then that chapter goes on to describe how Potiphar's wife wrongfully accused Joseph of making sexual advances toward her. And because of that, Potiphar, enraged, places Joseph in prison, punishing him for a crime he never committed. Joseph's master took him and put him in prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. But while Joseph was there in the prison, the Lord was with him. He showed him kindness and granted him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. So the warden put Joseph in charge of all those held in prison, and he was made responsible for all that was done there. The warden paid no attention to anything under Joseph's care because the Lord was with Joseph, gave him success in whatever he did. The story goes on to describe how Joseph, when he was in prison, interpreted dreams of others who were also there, including people who had significant roles and occupations in the king's palace. One of them was a cupbearer to Pharaoh. And when Joseph interpreted his dream, it set in motion the wheels by which this cupbearer was released from prison. And even though he told Joseph as he left he would remember him, he forgot him. So Joseph was again alone and in prison. But later on, when Pharaoh himself has mysterious dreams, suddenly the cupbearer remembers Joseph. And that brings Joseph out of prison, there to interpret the dreams of Pharaoh. And we pick it up after Pharaoh has heard Joseph interpret his dreams favorably. We read these words. Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Since God has made all this known to you, there is no one as discerning and as wise as you. You shall be in charge of my palace, and all my people are to submit to your orders. Only with respect to the throne will I be greater than you." So Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I hereby put you in charge of the whole land of Egypt." Then Pharaoh took his signet ring from his finger and put it on Joseph's finger. He dressed him in robes of fine linen and put a gold chain around his neck. He had him ride in a chariot as his second in command, and people shouted before him, "Make way!" Thus he put him in charge of the whole land of Egypt. Joseph was 30 years old when he entered the service of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and Joseph went out from Pharaoh's presence and traveled throughout Egypt. Now, anyone looking at the story of Joseph can see that he experienced incredible success and incredible suffering. He truly was a man for all seasons. And yet through it all, we hear it in these words that I just read to you. The Lord was with Joseph in good times and in bad. His circumstances changed dramatically. But no matter what situation he was in, Joseph knew that the Lord was with him. So Joseph shows us how to trust God no matter what situation we may find ourselves in, including the space between, which sometimes can be such a hard, lonely, and difficult place, full of waiting and hurting and hoping, a time when all we have is a promise from the Lord, and we just wonder about where God is in all of the hard things that we go through, wondering if his promises will ever become true for us. So there's a lot that Joseph teaches us here about what it means to trust God, to wait for God, to believe in God. Sometimes when we find ourselves in the space between, we can get a little bitter and resentful. We can get angry at God, thinking that he's treating us unfairly. Or for some people, struggle and hardship is actually a crisis of faith. They might even turn their back on God because he's simply not the kind of God they once believed in. Many people who look back on their lives who went through a very difficult experience sometimes can see how that made them question if God is even real, if he even exists. But for some people, times of suffering can have the exact opposite effect, and we see this in the story of Joseph. He didn't get bitter or resentful. He continued to trust God. His focus always was exclusively on God. In Max Lucado's book, You'll Get Through This, which is a book that explores the life, the struggles, and the prosperity and the blessings of Joseph, he writes this in one chapter, appropriately titled, Alone, but Not All Alone. He writes this, comparing Joseph's life to ours and how the Lord was with Joseph. Any chance that this is also true for you? That the Lord is with you? Here you are in your version of Egypt. It feels foreign. You don't know the language. You feel far from home, all alone. Money is gone. Expectations are dashed. Friends have vanished. Who's left? God is. He then goes on to refer to those incredible words of David in Psalm 139, where he asks, "Where can I go to get away from your spirit, O Lord? Where can I run from you?" Joseph's account of those verses could have read, "Where can I go to get away from your spirit? If I go to the bottom of the dry pit, to the top of the slave block, to the home of a foreigner, even there you will guide me." Your adaptation of these words might read as follows as he applies all of this to our situations. Where can I go to get away from your spirit, we might ask? If I go to the rehab clinic, the ICU, the shelter for battered women, the county jail, even there, you will guide me. You will never go where God is not, he concludes. I like that statement. You will never go where God is not. Now, sometimes it seems that God is not with us in the space between. We feel his absence, or if God is with us, we might have a kind of a love-hate relationship with God. We still acknowledge him as God, but we struggle with him and his promises. We might resent him a little bit. But Joseph's experience in prison, and who knows how long that was, it teaches us something very important here. Joseph was 17 when he was brought to Egypt as a slave. And as we heard in these words, he's 30 years old when Pharaoh makes him his second in command. So there's a span of 13 years there. Now, some of those years were spent in the service of Potiphar, but you almost get the feeling that most of those years were spent in prison. You get the sense that Joseph spent considerable time in that space between success in Potiphar's house and later success that would extend to the entire kingdom of Egypt. He spent years, in all likelihood, in prison. And yet, his focus, even there, was always on God. You know, it's interesting when you look at Christian history to see how God used prison experiences as times of incredible formation and spiritual development for people, preparing them for a task, a mission that they could not have even known about at the time. I think about John Bunyan, who wrote Pilgrim's Progress while he was in prison. No book has been published more than, other than the Bible, no book has been published more than Pilgrim's Progress. It continues to be a classic allegory of Christian faith. Dietrich Bonhoeffer wrote The Cost of Discipleship, that seminal book of reflection on what it really means to be a disciple of Jesus and what it costs us. He wrote that in prison. Chuck Colson went to prison, one of those imprisoned as a result of the Watergate scandal. It was in that experience that he became a Christian. And he founded prison ministry as a result of his personal journey and his discovery of the grace of God in Jesus Christ. He became a new man, born again, as the title of his book puts it, in prison. Martin Luther King, when he was in his Birmingham jail, penned that incredible letter articulating the power of nonviolent resistance in prison. Nelson Mandela's energy to end apartheid was kindled and stoked during his 27 years of imprisonment on Robben Island in South Africa. Prison is a hard and lonely place. There are many, many bitter, resentful, hardened people there, of course, but as these examples show, prison is also a space between that God uses to rehabilitate, to strengthen, to renew people's faith and trust in God, to create a new relationship with people, and to prepare them for a mission that he has in mind for them to do. Alexander Solzhenitsyn, when he left his prison, he was in the Gulag Archipelago, Siberian prison camp. A hard time of great persecution and suffering, and yet a place where he obtained incredible spiritual insight, so much so that as he left that place, he said, "Bless you, prison." He blessed that prison because of the lessons it gave him about the nature of good and evil, how it's not as if there's just good people in the world and then evil people. No, the line between good and evil runs straight through every heart, an insight that he learned there in prison, where God was working on him. The Midrash, which is a Jewish commentary on Old Testament stories, has a very intriguing comment. When Joseph returns to the land of Canaan to bury Jacob, his father, in his homeland, he goes back to the place of his own birth, the place where he grew up, and he goes past the very well where his brothers put him. And he blessed that place, according to the Midrash. "Bless the Lord, who did a miracle for me in this place," he said. Now, who knows if that really happened or not, but there is a sense in which we can all bless those places of loneliness and pain, those prisons and those pits. We can bless the places of suffering, ultimately because God blesses them. It's not our blessing primarily, but God who is present with us there. The Lord was with Joseph. The Lord is with us in all of those pits and broken places. And he brings a blessing there. Ultimately, this is what the person and work of Jesus Christ in the world is all about. As you read the Gospels, are you not struck by how often he was with people in all their brokenness, touching the diseased, welcoming the outcast, eating and drinking with sinners? He truly was with them in their suffering. Jesus on his cross not only suffers for us, but with us. He absorbs all our pain in his struggle. And so when we bless whatever pit we once inhabit or whatever prison we feel confines us, we are simply acknowledging that God is the one who primarily and ultimately blesses all the dark and hard places of our lives, all the spaces between, those lonely, hard places, where God never leaves us and where God uses all of the pain as raw material to create something new and beautiful. We can say, as the Midrash says Joseph said, "Blessed be God who did a miracle in this place." It's what Joseph believed, that God was always with him, God was always working. He waited, he trusted, his focus always was on God. It's what enables us in all of our hard places to have hope, to have faith and trust, to claim that the character of God is the one thing that never changes. Our circumstances, like Joseph's, can change dramatically and suddenly, unexpectedly. But God's promises, God's character, are constant. One person says that we ought to tell ourselves when we go through times of struggle these words, reminding ourselves of the permanence of God's character. God is still sovereign. God still knows my name. Angels still respond to God's call. The hearts of rulers still yield at his bidding. The death of Jesus still saves souls. The Spirit of God still indwells saints. Heaven is still only heartbeats away. The grave is still temporary housing. God is still faithful. He is not caught off guard. He uses everything for his glory and for my ultimate good. He uses tragedy to accomplish his will, and his will is right, holy, and perfect. Sorrow may come with the night, but joy comes with the morning. God bears fruit in the midst of affliction. What great words that we ought to tell ourselves, reminding us of how God is changeless and permanent. His promises are true. His character is trustworthy. What hope that gives us in the space between, as certainly as that must have been true for Joseph and all that he believed and waited for, we can too. Now, what this means for us today is not simply that we are comforted in knowing that the Lord is with us. There's incredible personal comfort that comes along with that. But I also want to highlight the importance of mission in the world. Do you notice that wherever Joseph is, whether that's in a palace or in prison, others notice him. He blesses the space that he inhabits. It was true for Potiphar. He recognized how the Lord was with Joseph, how successful Joseph was. It's true in prison, where the warden recognizes how Joseph is different from any other prisoner. It's true for Pharaoh, as he sees in Joseph someone who's unique, someone who brings blessing to the world wherever he goes. Now, this speaks to us about the importance of knowing that the Lord is with us in a missional sense. The Lord is with us. It's something that the world needs to know, so that the world can know that the Lord is with them and can be with them in a saving, incredibly beautiful way. This is why this space between, as hard and as lonely as it can be, is a time that bears fruit. I'm talking about the fruit of Christian witness, of sharing hope with others. Even these videos might accomplish that purpose in some small way. I encourage you to share them with others who are finding themselves in a hard place, in the space between of loneliness and doubt, perhaps even some resentment and bitterness toward God. This is a way of sharing how, because the Lord is with us, the Lord is with people, all people, in their struggles. And they need only to recognize that. We can help them to see it. They can see in us what Potiphar and the prison warden and Pharaoh saw in Joseph, something unique, something attractive, something that confirms the beauty of God. I hope you've experienced that in a personal way and are also one who, simply by your quiet perseverance, can share that hope and the power of God with others. I look forward to sharing more messages with you on what it means to occupy the space between, how God is working in us, working on us, changing us, so that we can become better people and stronger Christians, more vibrant sharers of the gospel in this world. These messages remind us that the Lord is with us, to change us, to be with us, to use us in all of those dark places for His glory. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you're doing well, and I look forward to sharing more messages with you in the future. Be well and be blessed.